What's up guys, Noah from Stage 3 Motorsports, and today we're going to be doing an install on this Fox Stage 1 suspension system for the 2019 Ranger. Now what you should get in this kit is going to be two front coilovers that are 2.0s, and they're adjustable with this little lower collar on them. Those are going to manage the front suspension. They're adjustable from anywhere from just 0, which is factory ride height, to 3 inches, which is quite a bit taller than factory, and you can decide what's best for your application. Then you're also going to get two 2.0 rear shocks for the back. These aren't going to change the ride height at all, but they do allow for a little bit more travel. So if you did add up to 1.5 inches of lift in the rear, this will still accommodate that. So we're going to install both front and rear, but we're going to start at the front. So let's jump right into it. So step one is obviously to remove the front wheels so we can gain access to the suspension. Then we're going to take an 8mm socket on a little ratchet here and loosen this bolt, which is going to allow us to remove this bracket. Then we're going to take a 10mm for the other side to remove the bracket holding the brake line. Now we're also going to remove these plastic clips here on the underside of the upper control arm that are holding this sensor wire, so that way we can get it completely out of the way and we're not going to stretch it. Now we need to move down to the lower portion of the knuckle where this tie rod end attaches, and we're going to take a 15mm socket here, deep well preferably, to get around the kind of the nub that comes through, and we'll loosen this up and pull it out. Now with the tie rod pulled out of the way, I like to go ahead and move the wire around the outside. That way the tie rod keeps it from falling into everything else that we're going to be working on. Now before we loosen anything else around the knuckle, we're going to move back here down where the sway bar attaches to the frame, and we're going to just loosen these bolts up a little bit to get a little bit of extra play in there. Next, we need to come back around to the knuckle, and we're going to take our 18mm socket and remove this nut, which will allow us to bring the upper control arm up and out of the way, so that way we can move the knuckle forward. With everything out of the way, we can work on removing our factory strut. So we're going to start at that top hat, and we're going to use a 15mm socket with our ratchet to remove the 3 nuts on top, securing it. Okay. Moving down to the bottom of the strut, there's 2 18mm nuts that we need to remove here to get this bottom mount up. So we're going to grab our deep well again and go ahead and loosen these. With the nuts removed on both the top hat and the bottom mount for our factory strut, we can go ahead and put some pressure on the lower control arm, and we're going to try and bring the top out forward. That way we can remove the whole unit. So here we have our new 2.0 Fox coilover for the front. Now one thing to note is that when you get these, the bottom mount may not actually be lined up with the holes in your lower control arm. And if that's the case, you will have to put those bolts in there and use a pry bar or something, long and sturdy to go ahead and twist this and get it straight with the holes. So if you do have that problem, it's just a matter of a little bit of tweaking, but you can still get it to line up the right way. So we're gonna start by getting the top in first. Now we've got our top washers and nuts on loosely, so there's still some play in this. And as you can see, the holes line up pretty decently when we put it in place. So we're gonna go ahead and do the bottom mounts now loosely, and then once we have it all in here straight, we can tighten everything down. Everything is lined up and nice and straight, so we're gonna go ahead and take a 19mm socket on our ratchet, tighten up the bottom completely, and then we'll move to the top. Up top, we're gonna use a 17mm socket for the new hardware. Big boy toys. All right. So make sure you go back through, torque everything to spec for the top and bottom so that way your strut stays in place. And then now we need to worry about getting our knuckle back up and lined up with the upper control arm, and we can get the stud through the top. Now, there is quite a bit of tension on this upper control arm, so this is a good area to have a buddy come in and help you put pressure down on it so that way you can get it tightened in. And with that being said, you may also need to wiggle this a bit to get your axle to reseat into its little spline section. So once that's in, we can shift this forward and pull it down. Nice. Now, to keep from just spinning this ball joint infinitely, you're gonna need a 18mm wrench as well as a smaller 8mm socket to hold the stud. We can put this on and that'll allow us to support it so that way we can turn it and actually tighten the nut. From there, we can go ahead and reattach our tie rod end using the same method, but you're gonna need a 7mm socket for the stud on this and a 15mm wrench to actually turn the nut. Also, make sure you get your sensor line out of the way. Now let's go ahead and reattach our brake line bracket and our sensor line. So that's gonna wrap up the install for the front coilovers. You'll go ahead and do just the same steps on the other side. It's completely identical, driver and passenger. And now let's move over to the back. So replacing the rear shocks is quite a bit more simple than doing the front. All you'll need is a ratchet with a 15mm socket on it to remove the top and bottom bolts of the shock. That'll allow you to pop it out and then just simply replace it with the new one. Now you will want to be cautious that you don't lose the nut on the other side because it does fit in kind of a square channel, and so sometimes those can fall out. But other than that, we can jump in and start loosening this up. Now we're just going to go ahead and replace it with this new Fox shock in the same orientation, and we'll start at the top. All right, guys, and just like that, that's all it takes to swap in the rear shocks. You'll do the same thing on both sides. And that's going to be a wrap on the whole install for this Fox Stage 1 kit. So if you guys are interested in picking up the system for yourself, you can head down in the description below and we'll have a link that'll shoot you over to the website. Now, one last note is when you get your truck done and you've done this install, we do highly recommend that you take your truck to get a professional alignment done on the vehicle, or else it could possibly change the suspension geometry and wear your tires a little bit funny if you don't. So we do highly recommend that. But other than that, it's going to be a wrap on this install, and I will see you guys next time.